Well, hello there, ladies and gents. It's great to see you again, and welcome back to Path to Abundant Living. Ryan Ruff here, your moderator, but as always, I'll be joined by Matt Nordman and Scott Morrison of Morrison Nordman Wealth Management. Excited to be bringing on a special guest today, and that's Chancellor Emeritus, of course, Victor Boschini joining us in the house today. We're very excited to be sitting down with him and talking through his role as Chancellor Emeritus over at Texas Christian University and all the effort that he's put into throughout his time there. We're really excited to have him aboard today. But before we bring the Chancellor Emeritus on, let's go ahead and say hi to the guys. Matt, Scott, good to see you today. How are we doing, guys?
Ryan, great to see you. Professor, how are you today?
I'm great, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Hi, Ryan.
Of course, good to see Scott. And hey, guys, we've had this date circled on the calendar for quite some time. Victor Boschini, joining us from TCU today. Matt, why don't you frame it up for us? Why'd you want to have the Chancellor on? I know, obviously, we always want to bring guests on that kind of bridge the gap, if you will, from wealth management to living that life of significance that we talk about. But why we want to have on the Chancellor today?
Well, Ryan, so we all know that higher education is extremely important. Now, not right for everybody, but for those that it is a good situation, we thought, well, who better to have on than Chancellor of TCU? And thankfully, my sister, my favorite sister, and for the record, only sister, Andrea, uh, has worked with the chancellor for many years and has spoken so highly of him. And I've had a chance to meet him a couple times, and he's been gracious enough to join us on the show. And I thought, man, let's get his insight and advice.
Perfect. Well, Chancellor Boschini, thank you so much for carving some time out of your day today, and welcome to Path to Abundant Living.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to just be here.
Great to see you again. And I know you've recently transitioned from Chancellor to Chancellor Emeritus, but I want to take us back, if you would. How did you become Chancellor of TCU?
Oh gosh, I was lucky and blessed. Okay, 23 years ago, I was president of a big state school. But before I was at that school, I had worked at another private college, and a person who was a trustee there was from Dallas and was friends with people who were trustees at TCU who lived in Dallas and lived in Fort Worth. When TCU was looking for a chancellor, she mentioned to one of those trustees, "Oh, a long time ago, I worked with this guy. I don't know if you could find him, but he might be a good fit." And I was just lucky that they found me.
So, in your role, what do you wish someone would have told you then that you didn't know, prior to becoming chancellor that surprised you after you were hired?
Oh, wow. Oh, a lot of things, but the main thing was that it's all about people. I was worried. I thought it was about, leadership and decisiveness and da da da, and that's all part of it. But like any job, the people are the most important part of it. And if you can't work with them, you can't be a leader if you don't have followers.
So where did you develop that and what have you learned through that process?
Wow. Well, I don't know if I did develop it. You'd have to ask people who work with me. But I'd say from leadership roles I had as a kid that helped. Being an RA, being a rush chairman in your fraternity, working at a car wash, all these different experiences I had led me to believe, I would watch other people and I realized that the people who were really successful, really, although they were smart, and I'm not saying they were more smart about people than they were about physics or math or science or English.
Victor, I was curious, obviously, with all the changes in education in the modern world today, where do you see higher education going, especially as it relates to all this talk about AI?
Wow, I think that's the billion dollar question actually nowadays. And if I would tell you that answer, I'd be lying because nobody knows. But I just know this, it's going to be different. And I think what's going to happen in higher ed is it's going to be what I call on demand. Okay, go back a step. I think for when we were all kids, well, maybe not Ryan, but when we were all younger, The people who had all the power in higher ed were the faculty, the staff, the coaches, the institution. Now all the power is in the hands of the students. So if you're an athlete, you can go wherever you want. You get paid to play. You could not play one day if they're not paying you enough, stuff like that. If you're just a traditional student, you can get your education when you want it, where you want it, and at the exact moment you want it. And I think that's what's the biggest change in higher ed is the shift in power. And maybe we should have always had the students have more power. That's part of the problem. And so we'll just have to work through this period of intense change and see where it's going to end up.
If I could piggyback on that, how has that affected the traditional student who lives on campus?
It's impacted them a lot. First of all, the school I work for is a very traditional school. We have residence halls, we have fraternities, sororities, we have a residential experience. And we say that's a big part of our school is you live here, you get impacted by the people you live with, you get impacted by your professors, and you can't do that the same when you're looking at a computer in your family room, learning English or math or physics or, well, you guys finance for you smart business guys. But yeah, and you can learn those skills, you can learn those disciplines, but you can't learn what we're trying to teach you. We're trying to teach you how to live a better life, not just how to earn a living. And you can do both. And so we're saying if you come here, you stay with us, we'll give you that value added. But that's the problem in the future. Will enough people be willing to pay for that when they see they could send their kid to their bedroom to get the same math course online? I think they will, because I think enough parents will see the value in doing this. But I hope I'm right.
Well, I would think that I'd like to believe the same way that you do that we are created to interact with other humans. And yes, you can learn and you can ask whether it's Google or ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of these things, right, to get the quote unquote answer, right? It's do you have the problem solving skills and can you interact with other humans, right? I mean, isn't
Right.
that what we're going for here?
Right. It's all about their communication skills. And that's the one thing you don't get off AI. They can tell you the answer, but they can't tell you how to interpret the answer and how to spread the answer to other people.
Yeah, that's so with all the changes that you've seen, what did you enjoy most about your work in your tenure as chancellor?
Oh, that's easy. The students, that's the only good part about it some days. You know, where else could I work? I basically work in a park. It's absolutely gorgeous, all green around me. I can walk when I'm bored and, get to different buildings. I work in a park. I work with super smart people who are all smarter than me. And I work with students who do crazy things on a daily basis and really exciting things and, have new discoveries. And those same kids are also, you know, drinking too much and having a party and you coming up with these crazy ideas and saying, why can't our world be like this, whatever this is in their mind? And they're still young enough that they have fresh eyes and they ask all the questions that all of us lose after we're 30. So yeah, it's definitely the students. They make this great.
That's so great to hear. And as a side note, if you ever get a chance, anyone that hears this is go tour the university because it is a beautiful campus.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously one of the things that you're very proud of. You've had so many years at TCU. I would love to hear some of the other things you're particularly proud of.
Oh gosh, I'm proud that we've grown tremendously, the number of students wise. I'm proud that we have invested in our academic programs and we've invested in our athletic programs, which a lot of schools, they might do it, but they're afraid to talk about it because it's not seen as what you're supposed to do. I think it's just as important because I think what a lot of people forget about our athletes is that they are also students. And people say things about athletes that they could never get away with saying about a racial group or an ethnic group or a person who is straight or gay or whatever. And you can say those things about athletes and get away with it, but it's because they don't consider them students. And that's what I think is missing. And I think at some schools they aren't students. At TCU they are.
That's encouraging to hear because I would agree that people, because you can throw, shoot, hit, kick, whatever the sport is better than others, it is amazing what people will say to 18 to 22 year olds or about them. It is unconscionable at times.
Agreed. I think Americans in general have a real love-hate with athletics. We love athletic. I'm talking me, but I think most men and women are like this. You love athletics. You like the sport. You like the underdog. You like the colors on the field, the whole pageantry of everything. But there's this other side of us that's like, hey, I want to be the football star. I want to be the volleyball star, and I'm not. And so there's a little part of me that has a chip on my shoulder about that.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong about that. I do have a question later on about some of the success that some of your teams have had. So take us through. So my kids have one just recently graduated and the other one a few years ago, and Scott has grandkids, and I know you have grandkids. What would you tell parents or grandparents who are sending their kids off to college for the first time? This is the one time in life, it's a slightly different now, where we're going to send you off to a place you may or may not know anything about, and you may or may not know anybody, and then we're going to put you in a room with somebody you've never met before. What's the
Right.
advice you would give to parents and grandparents?
Let them struggle a little bit. And that's really hard to do because I'm a parent of four, and that is difficult when it's your kid. But I think it is important to let them struggle a little bit, not jump in and solve every problem. Okay, for instance, you should never, ever call the chancellor about anything for any reason ever for your kid unless they're dying. But you shouldn't call when they don't like the food in the cafeteria or if their roommate left these are all real things that have happened to me, left their underwear out on the bed and it's embarrassing when your kid has a guest in the room. You know, you just shouldn't do that. You shouldn't call a professor and try to get your kid in their class if that's the class your kid needs, but they couldn't get in through registration. What you should do is go back to your kid and say, try to work it out, see what happens. Go ask. But what happens is we parents try to fix everything ourselves. And then what it does is it makes the kids total infants. They like my kids drive me crazy. They think everything is confrontation. They don't think it's just a conversation. And so they don't want to ask because it's awkward. That's awkward. That's what they say. I'm like, well, that's what life is. Life's a little bit awkward, and you got to be willing to put your hand out and ask the question. And so my biggest advice to parents, I would be is take a breath, let them go, and let them struggle for a few weeks. Now, I'd keep in touch with them and I'd be supportive of them and all that, but I wouldn't try to solve their problems. I would let them tell me their problems, and then I would say, here's what I think you ought to do about that, but I wouldn't do it for them.
I imagine you just shared a couple, but I imagine you have some really good uh, stories about parents calling about the food in the cafeteria. I can't even imagine what those conversations were like. And oh my gosh, that is hilarious.
Well, Chancellor,
I,
I was just going to say on the flip side of that, you just offered some advice for the parents or grandparents sending their kids off to college. What about the students themselves? Any little bit of information or advice you could share to them?
Sure. In general, I think this is good for all of us, but students especially have to learn to live in liquid. But they want to live in concrete. We all do. You want absolute answers. You want yes or no. You want black and white. But that's not what life is about. Life is more like liquid. It's like treading water. At least I think that. And so I would just encourage them to, again, sit back, take a deep breath, and learn to live a little bit in the gray and not always need the color black or white.
You know,
That's hard to do.
yeah, it's extremely hard to do. You had mentioned like with your kids, and we were just having this conversation that we all, you would go ask. Like if you didn't know, you would ask.
Yeah,
And you talked about your kids thinking that's confrontational. Well, because most people under pick the age, I don't know, what they're going to do is, well, I'm not going to ask a human, right? I'm going to look it up on my device, right? On my phone, right?
right,
What is the thing? How do I get to? Where do I go? Instead of
right,
saying, well, just go ask that person over there. They can help you.
right.
And
That's
they're
what I always find it funny because I've got mid-30s children now who all I have 7 grandchildren, and the thing that they constantly come to me about are the problems that they have with other people, and that if it can't be answered by Googling it, and that they can't actually have a conversation with somebody because
Right.
they're uncomfortable in that. It's just amazing to me that we call things social media or Facebook, or we call these things that these are actually, methods to communicate with each other, but they were actually seem like we're doing less communicating than we've ever done before.
Oh gosh, Scott, you're a genius. That's exactly what it is. And here's my favorite thing about social media, how they call friends, like you friend a
Right.
person. That's not a
Right.
friend. A friend is a person like I know him, I or her. Like I know their warts. I talk to them and I accept them for that. But a friend is not someone I press on, whatever the social media stuff is. I'm not on social media, so I don't know all the terms they use. But yeah, actually that's a lie. I know all the terms they use because I listen to the kids talk about it all the time. I don't know what exactly they mean. A lot of times I pretend like I do to keep in the conversation with them, but I'm really not sure. Then after a while, you get, oh, that's what friending means.
Oh, that's fabulous. So now we know that you have very recently become Chancellor Emeritus. What's the advice? So Daniel Pollan is now the Chancellor. What advice do you have for him coming into the role that you wish someone would have told you?
Oh, wow. Well, I hope and I wish I would have done better at this, would stop and kind of smell the roses and enjoy the moment and just live in so many good things that happen to you when you're on a campus and enjoy it. But what was always doing is looking for the next thing, and so like you win the Rose Bowl. This was one thing we did. We won the Rose Bowl. That was amazing. And so we bask in the glory of that for about 8 minutes. And then I think, oh my gosh, I have to make sure the coach stays. And how do I talk to his agent? And what's that salary got to be? And I wish I would have just taken a breath and enjoyed it more.
Okay. So now in your new role, what will you be doing in this new role as Emeritus?
I'll just be doing three things: fundraising, and enrollment management. And they're the three things that I enjoy nowadays. And so, oh, but also I get to teach my classes. I used to only teach one class a year, and now I can teach two because I'll have time to do it.
What classes will you be teaching?
This fall, I'm teaching one in the College of Education, talking about how the 1960s, the decade of the 1960s, changed what happens in America forever. Whether we through it or not, it still affects us today. And then I'm teaching one in the College of Business, and we're starting a leadership minor, and I'm teaching a fundamentals of leadership course.
Both of those sound very fascinating to me, and I really love. Can someone take these classes online?
No.
Okay.
And that's because of me, because no, I don't want to teach online. I want you to pay the money to sit in my class and talk to other kids and come late. And yeah, but so no, unfortunately, you can't.
Okay.
I could arrange it for you, Matt, but
Okay. Good. Good.
yeah.
Or maybe it could be recorded, and then I can. That sounds fascinating to me because I would agree. There's a lot of things from the 60s, and if you go back even to the 1920s and 1930s, that again are debated still to this day, almost 100 years later, economic and political decisions that were made almost 100 years ago that some say, rightly or wrongly, we're still being affected by today.
Right. I think again, I have tons of theories, so you don't have to listen to any of these because my kids don't either. But I think that Americans in general value individualism, especially where I live. It's the spirit of the West and conquering the frontier and each man on his own bootstraps and each woman on her own bootstraps, type of thing. But on the other hand, they do a lot of things governmentally that make you do group work, what I would call group work. And a lot of that happened in the 60s. Some of that was really good, like trying to end racism, sexism, homophobia, all those things. All those things had their roots in some protest in the 1960s. Those are the good part of it. The bad part of it, a lot of stuff they did makes you act as a group when you really want to act as an individual. This is
Right.
hard for me to explain this because I'm not that smart, but I also don't think time exists, but I'm not smart enough to explain that to you, but I know I'm right about that.
Okay, that's good. I like that. I like the confidence.
Oh yeah, I'm really confident in everything I think.
So you sound like me, Victor, and it's like I like to think that I'm smart enough to know everything, but I'd also like to think that I'm smart enough to know that I don't know everything.
Absolutely. My dad would always say this, and I think this is so true, and I tell this to anyone I have influence over. If you think you're the smartest guy in any room, that's an absolute sign that you're not the smartest guy in that room.
Correct.
You should be, I like to teach in my leadership course, I call them secure leaders. And a secure leader would be the kind of person that wouldn't mind Ryan and Scott challenging him or Matt telling me a different idea or pointing out that I'm crazy about something. That's a secure leader because I also am a big believer that if we all talk together about something, it would almost always come up with a better answer than if I did it alone.
I I
So if I change the direction here a little bit on how people have influenced you, where you've allowed people to have a conversation about what needed to change. One of the things I noticed here, and I didn't realize, was that the 2024 mascot video changed from the horned frog to a squirrel. I
Yeah.
want to know what high level conversation went on about that.
Oh yeah, that was super high level. Okay. We have young people who work here in our social media area. And this one young woman who works there, who now I think is a frickin' genius, but before, when she told me this, I thought she was an idiot. She pitched this idea to me of let's do a video and let's say you're going to change the mascot. And I'm like, that's totally not funny. In fact, it sounds stupid to me. It's kind of silly. And so she kept harping on me, harping on me. She goes, I promise you, if you do this, it'll work. So, okay, I'm going with you on this one thing. And we did it. And it became the biggest video we ever did. People still talk about it. And so I went back to her the next day and I said, okay, I fold. Anything you want me to do from now on, just set it up and I'm there. Because it turned out to be fun and funny and people, but it was funny when we did that video. I got literally hundreds of emails because people, there's a lot of anger in America. I always tell this to my students too. Try to resist all that anger. What I always say is, let me prove I'm a fool to you before you assume it. But they all assume it now. So all these people went to their keyboard and sent me these stinging messages about how dare that I change the 150-year-old mascot, especially something as stupid as squirrel, blah, blah. They didn't even watch the whole video.
because it's an April Fool's joke.
Yeah. But that was what's so great about it.
It's a fabulous video. We will link it in the show notes because it's worthwhile. And along those lines, there's another video. Is this the same person who got you to participate in the women's basketball video?
Yes. Yep. And that was a big mistake on my part in that I should have done a little research on that before I did it because I'm not a basketball player. And I could have at least looked better in the video if they would have shown me like how to act cool and how to look like I'm throwing it the right way.
Okay. Well, and speaking of the women's basketball team, and you talked about athletics and the student athletes, talk about the success that the women's team had last year.
Oh my gosh, that was such a fun ride and will continue to be a fun ride. It was just incredible. Basically, because I was the chancellor, I lived on campus, a house they provide. So you're right here, you're by everything all the time. I'm 3 blocks from campus. So my wife and I, whenever we were in town, well, she goes to every women's game and I go to most of them. But, my job's to travel a lot and beg you for money. So I'm not here. So I would go to the ones when I was home. It was amazing, like game after game, the crowds grew and grew and grew and grew. And the crowds, and this is terrible and it's sexist, but it's the truth, they became a men's basketball crowd, size wise. And that was really cool for the women on our team, for the coaches, everybody. And I think it really made them feel valued, which is what you want everybody to feel, every kid to feel that way. Every adult even wants to feel valued. The sad thing is, it also shows that winning kind of solves every other problem you ever have. And that's bad about us too, but it's true. People want to win and they want to support a winner.
Yeah, yes, they do. And making the run to the Elite Eight and just missing out on the Final Four is a big deal
Yeah,
for the student athletes, the coaching staff, and the general student population and the university as a whole, right? It brings more eyes. So when you're out, in your words, begging for money, this can't hurt. And winning Rose Bowls, right? That can't hurt.
absolutely. When I was getting my doctorate, I was in a program at Indiana University that trains it's built to train college presidents, college leaders, And if you would have told one of my professors then that athletics were so important as I think they are now, they would have thought you were crazy. But it is.
It is crazy. And you had talked about it with now with a NIL, the name image likeness, and the transfer portal, which allows students to transfer, for lack of a better term, at will. How do you see that affecting the quote unquote student experience?
Oh, I think it has a seismic effect on it. It already has. Go back a step though. This is also our fault because I think the moment we started paying about 25 years ago, these astronomical salaries to coaches, that was the beginning of this. Because if I'm a player and I'm on the field, I'm saying, hey, I'm the show, but he's getting all the dough. And they're right. And so that was the beginning of the whole change of heart. Coaches can transfer teams at will. They leave and come whenever they want. So why can't I? Of course, now we have the transfer portal. Coaches get paid. Why can't I get paid? And I think, we've just begun to see how this is going to change things. I think one thing it's going to do, it's going to end, for the most part, athletes having this bond with their institution and feeling the rest of their life, I'm going to represent Texas Christian University, or I'm going to represent USC, or Ohio State, or whatever. Because when you go to 3 or 4 different schools, after a while, in your mind, you realize it's a business, and I'm a product of that business. And yeah, this week I'm going to wear red and white, but next week I might wear blue and gold, and I'll be just as happy because that's my job. I don't want them to look at it as a job. I want them to look at it as part of their collegiate experience.
But this comes back to what you talked about earlier, the going through the hard things or the challenging times, because maybe you didn't start your freshman year. And instead of buckling down and working, it's like, well, I'm just going to go to a different school that recruited me, or someone else, they'll pay me a little bit more money,
Right.
right, to get a quote unquote opportunity.
Right. If I don't like the coach, I'm going to transfer. I had a kid I talked to recently, and he said he was going to transfer. So I was talking to him, an athlete, and as a kid, I actually know really well. So what I'm saying, it might sound harsh, but I mean, I could say these things to him because I know him. And so I'm like, okay, tell me exactly why you're transferring. He goes, the coach is so damn awkward. You just wouldn't believe it. So damn aggravating. And he just aggravates me. And I said, okay, is he doing anything illegal or immoral or unethical? No, no, no. Okay, so tell me what he's doing. And what he was doing were things that you and I would say are aggravating. And so what would say to that kid is, get your pants back on and get in there, put your big boy pants on and you live with that and you learn to deal with it. And you're aggravating to people too, but it's not anything illegal, immoral, and unethical. You work around it. That's how you learn to work. But his solution was to transfer, and he did, just because he really didn't like the personality of the coach. Well, there's tons of people's personalities I don't like, but you have to deal with them. People don't like my personality.
I don't believe that.
Well, you don't know enough people that.
I don't believe
I
that.
think
Well,
that's from a personal level. My dad was a Division III basketball coach.
Right.
So, and he recently passed a few years ago. He would be turning over in his grave with all this
Oh,
NIL stuff. He's from the Judd Heathcote and Tom Izzo ilk,
oh yeah.
the Bobby Knight ilk, where
Yep.
he had a tendency to kind of jump down your throat and get in your face. And at the same time, I know the level of relationship that the former players have because of having gone through the conflict and coming out at the other end with either success or resolution. And that's my fear with the NIL now, is that literally I think every professional athlete would certainly like to be a free agent every year. And that's what essentially we have in the NCAA now, is we have we have free agency every single year. It just seems amazing to me that the kids can't work through, a conflict. Now, again, if it's purely money driven, and if we're talking about going from a mid-American school where you're the star and now you have a platform to go to a large school like TCU, I guess that makes more sense to me. But yeah, I think that's where, tell me if I'm wrong, if the NCAA and the direction that the schools need to go in the future, that's going to be an ongoing issue. How do you provide that experience for the kids that sets them up for life and dealing with conflict, and still pay them at the same time?
Right. You're absolutely right, Scott. That's exactly the problem in a nutshell. And the compounding factor on that, and I find that the women athletes are more rational about this. This is again my personal experience. The women athletes are more rational about what I'm about to say than the men athletes are. But 99% of them are sure they're going to be the next Joe Namath, or they're going to be the next, whoever is the
Right.
superstar. They're sure it's me. Even when I show them the statistics and I say only 0.04% of you, or whatever it is, are going to ever play professionally, they don't listen because I'm that 0.04%. And if
Right.
they don't think that, their dad does, or
Right.
their mom. It's more often their mom, actually, with the male athletes. And I think they're very unrealistic. So they feel like they don't have to listen to all that stuff you just said because it won't apply to me.
So and to piggyback on that, again, this is my own curiosity, because I know we're still throwing out that terminology of the student athlete. How does the student athlete who is going from one school to the next, how does he transfer his credits? How does that next school actually prepare him in whatever curriculum he's, whatever path he's heading or she's heading down?
It doesn't, and they don't care. That's the sad part.
Yeah.
And if you're a person who transfers and you're on your third different college, which I follow this one athlete I know really well, he's on his third college right now. I love this kid. He'll never graduate, because what people also don't realize is that there's this other rule about graduating from a college. And it's basically set up, how could I say this? So that you can't go to a community college and then transfer to Harvard your last semester and graduate with a Harvard degree. And so
Right.
what every college says is you have to have so many credits from your native institution to get a degree from me. Well, if I transfer 3 times, even if I transfer twice for a lot of kids, if I
Right.
transfer once, you have a difficult time doing that, but you can do it. Transfer twice, it gets harder. Transfer 3 times, there's no way in HE double hockey sticks you're ever going to graduate from college.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing
and
is,
the
they
sad
don't care.
and the sad thing is, right, now you can make some money but for a lot of them, like you had said, the statistics show they're not going to be a professional athlete. And so in that case, you better have a great team around you to give you the advice to hold on to as much of that money as you possibly can.
Right. And it's really hard to tell any 18-year-old boy to be a saver
Yeah.
because their whole being, their whole zeitgeist when you're an 18-year-old boy is set up not to be a saver. But that's what you want to say. I recently ran into one of our athletes. My wife and I were out at there's a local like high-end shopping center here, a place where I don't even buy things. And I have an actual full-time job. And we were there to have dinner with some friends. And out of one of the, if I would say the name of the store, it's a high-end store you would all know. He walks out with 4 huge bags of all the like name brand stuff from that store. And since it's a small enough school, I knew him. I called him over and I'm like, Darius, and I'm making this name up. What what are you doing? What's all that stuff for? Is that for your girlfriend? He was like, hell no, this is for me. And he started showing me what he bought. And literally he bought about $9,000 worth of stuff at this one trip. And that's just adding up in my head. And that's because he thinks he's always going to have that money. But what he doesn't realize is he won't always have that money. And some of these kids, sadly, will make more money as a college student than they ever make in life per year.
Right.
But they don't think like that, especially if you're a boy.
What is it? The prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed till you're 25, and then throw in the male aspect of it, and
Right.
could be later for some.
Right. Right.
Well, we have taken a lot of your time. I have 2 quick questions. One might be a little controversial, though.
Okay.
So I've been told, or the question is, Far Side versus Peanuts / Soup.
Oh, gee, no problem. Far Side. No problem there.
As one who has received as a gift one year the entire compilation of the Far Side, it is fantastic. But I know
Right.
there's somebody who is a big Snoopy fan, i.e. my sister.
Yeah,
So
really.
a point of contention between the 2 of you.
Right. Right.
And then finally, what is your favorite Elvis Presley song and favorite Elvis Presley song to sing along to?
Oh, that's 2 different answers. Favorite is Blue Christmas. I think that's just such a good sad song when you want to feel sad. My favorite sad song is by the Brooklyn Bridge, and that's I Heard You're Getting Married. That's a great old song. So whenever I got dumped by somebody, which happened a lot, I would always get into that song. I loved it. But my favorite Elvis song would be that. My favorite Elvis song to sing would be none of them because I have a terrible voice.
Okay. All right. Well, again, appreciate so much you joining us today, and
Thanks for having
wish
me.
you the best in your new role as Chancellor Emeritus.
Thank you all very much. It was nice meeting all of you.
Alrighty, well, there you have it, folks. Of course, we have Victor Boschini joining us, the Chancellor Emeritus from TCU. Great sitting down with him today, hearing about the dynamic and ever-changing landscape that is universities in today's day and age, especially with how it relates to athletics. But Matt, I'll throw it over to you. What were some of your key takeaways from the conversation today?
It's interesting in his role that the number of parents that would reach out directly to what you would equate to the CEO of the company about the food in the cafeteria, or reaching out to the professor instead of, like he said, hey, let's give our kids the skills to work through these quote unquote problems or develop problem solving skills to interact with other people as opposed to, hey, let's jump in and solve it.
Right. Yeah. Scott, what about you? I mean, you had some interesting questions specifically with how it pertained to the athletics landscape with NILs. Anything in particular you took away from that?
Well, I think, maybe it's just the old man in me, but, and the old athlete and knowing what my experiences were. But I felt like Victor and I probably could have had a bunch of conversations after this podcast. But the thing I took away from it was just the challenges. the challenges now of going to college, is not as if they weren't great enough. I mean, but it was always about just leaving home and new relationships and things like that. And now it just seems like it's just so much more of that. Or just the idea of going to college and not having, if comes down to a money issue, not having the opportunity to have relationships because you're either taking your courses online or you're commuting and you're leaving campus at the end of the day. And I guess if we could somehow tie that into financial planning, I mean, knowing how much college costs, if we want to give our kids the full experience, we've got to do some really good planning around on how to fund that.
Sure. And as somebody who went to a 4-year school in Penn State University, it was great to hear the chancellor talk about the importance of some of those interpersonal connections that you would make in maybe some of those first few years where you're living on campus, you're living with somebody maybe that's completely random and new in your life. And it forces you as an 18-year-old ish to kind of navigate these interesting and complex social dynamics that you haven't been exposed to before. So it was great to hear the chancellor talk about the value that very much does lie in that from a social skills perspective. But I hear you, Scott. I mean, it's expensive in today's day and age to go that route and to provide that opportunity for families. And it's certainly opened a lot of eyes these days to a lot of families out there as to whether or not they want to do the community college maybe for years 1 and 2 and then send their kid off to the big school.
Right. Yeah, it comes with having a plan for like Scott was talking about, the financial plan for it, but talking through it as a family, like, with your kids or grandkids. Hey, what are your goals or aspirations? And some know right from the get-go, this is what I want to do, or the path I want to take, and others don't. But then helping them navigate that, and then having the financial resources set aside to be able to help them get to that point.
Sure. Well, guys, I mean, I know you're having a lot of conversations surrounding so many different walks of life and the financial planning that goes with those goals and walks of life. College is probably a hot topic that comes up with a lot of your clients. For anybody out there that would enjoy having that conversation and talking through not only the back end logistics of how to financially, allocate money, make it work so that their children could maybe get that 4-year experience, maybe the 2-year experience we talked about, but also maybe just talk bigger, broader towards their ultimate goals for the family, their children, so on and so forth. What would be the best way somebody could reach out to you guys and just open up that dialogue?
I will answer that in a second, Ryan, but I want to go back and one quick thing.
Sure.
And say thank you again to my sister Andrea for setting this interview up. Anybody that wants to talk, set up a call, get to know you, kind of flush out those things that you're trying to achieve, go to our website, Morrison Nordman with 2 N's on the end.com, or call the office 517-333-7967.
Fantastic. Well, fellas, it was great getting to spend the morning with you. I always enjoy, sitting down, and really fun guest in the chancellor. I do feel that we could have let the cameras roll for hours, to be honest. Very fun guy, but looking forward to seeing you guys back here on the next episode.
Thanks, Ryan. Have a great day. We'll look forward to the next one. See you soon, Scott.
All right. Perfect. Well, thanks, gentlemen. And look, folks, we want to take a final moment, as we always do on this show, and thank you for making us a part of your day. If you enjoyed today's discussion, if you learned a thing or two, make sure you hit that subscribe button then on whichever platform you checked us out on, so that you don't miss out on any future episodes where Matt, Scott, myself, we sit down and we bring some really unique guests onto this show to explore their expertise and, of course, their walk of life and how it really intersects with wealth management as a whole. But for Matt and Scott, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long now, but we appreciate everybody stopping by and being with us today on Path to Abundant Living.